Hello there, Atheist Jr. here, your friend and humble narrator. And I'm so happy to be here with my guest, Stated Clearly. We tried to do this stream yesterday, but life happens and we're doing take two today. But it's
I made it this time.
yeah, we're all ready, and I'm really excited to have you here because I'm a big
Mhm.
fan of your channel and what you do. Could
Oh,
you
thanks.
take a second to give like your background and just how you got started doing these YouTube videos?
Yeah, my educational background is I was studying to be a scientific illustrator, and so I have a graphic design illustration background. I was also studying biology at the time, and then I ended up working at Oregon State University, doing helping professors take their lessons online. So transitioning from classroom to eCampus, and doing that, I started doing a lot of different, recording different videos with them, and I wanted to make some of my own, so I started doing them on YouTube, and it took off. I've got two YouTube channels. I've got Stated Clearly, which is where I really make stuff that's for classroom use. So it's very much like science standards and the topics that you would learn in high school and middle school, mostly high school. And then on Stated Casually, I talk about whatever, but usually it's genetics, evolution stuff. But there I'll talk a little bit more about the issues that people have with when religion and science clash. Those are things that I don't talk about on Stated Clearly, because that's just for classroom use, and I try to avoid all the anything that wouldn't be appropriate for a classroom. But so yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing it for 10 years now. Is when I first started Stated Clearly, and it's been going great. Teachers using them in the classrooms, finding lots of use for them. It's been a lot of fun.
So you've had the channel going for a while, actually.
Yeah. Stated Clearly's been here for a while.
Wow. And so you do all or most of the animations on those channels.
Yeah.
How did you get started? Like, how did you learn how to do that? Because the animations are really
Yeah.
great. I love how clean they are. I like
No,
the
thanks.
style.
Yeah. Well, the style is kind of copied off of. I don't know if you know who Rosemary Mosco is. She does a comic book called Bird and Moon Comics. She actually helped me with. She did some of the illustrations on. It wasn't my first one. It was like my second or third animation. She did some of the illustrations for that, and my style was already kind of similar to hers. But then like working with her, really kind of synced up with hers. But the animation itself, I had learned how to do that at a previous job. So before I was working for Oregon State University, I worked for this startup company that taught people how to trade stocks in the stock market, and I just messed with animation when I was doing that, and really honed my skills there. But it was just, yeah, like online tutorials and stuff. No official training in animation, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun learning how to do that and playing around with different styles. I also tried doing 3D stuff for a little while. Some of my videos have 3D stuff. I had hired a guy to help me with that, and but yeah, mostly just this pretty simple 2D animation style where really things are just kind of sliding on screen and off screen. And then sometimes I'll build more complex, like two-dimensional puppets. Like I've got a crocodile that'll snap at things, and I've got a chameleon that can eat bugs and stuff. Little pieces that I reuse quite a bit in my videos. But
So the 3D stuff, was that like Blender? Were you trying to learn how to?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
tough.
Well,
Yeah, that's hard to learn.
yeah. Well, I had a guy who he works in Blender, and I just had to give him the molecules. So I just had to build the molecules and then give them to him, and then he would do the animation there. But yeah, I had to learn that a little bit, and I might be doing that again in an upcoming animation. I want to do an animation on temperature, like what is temperature and how does it work, which you have to do a lot of stuff at the molecular level to explain that properly. So I'll probably be diving back into that, or maybe I'll try and hire someone to help me with that. But yeah, it's
Awesome.
Animation's fun. It's really fun. It's just a whole nother. I've got this science stuff, reading lots of science journals, talking with scientists, and then the animation side. It's these two totally different worlds. It's really fun to play in both of those at the same time.
Yeah. Well, okay. We have a super sticker from Scott Duke for 4.99. So thank you, Scott. Thank you for the donation. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we get started?
Mhm.
Since John is a guest on my channel, I'm going to make him watch a Kent Hovind video, which is customary.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that's hazing or count. I don't know if that counts as cyberbullying, but we're just gonna go with it. So Kent a while ago did a Whack an Atheist video about you. Um,
Mhm.
and so I guess we're just going to go through it a little bit. I had to edit this one like I did my Creaky Blinder video, and edit in just the clips from the actual video because the audio is so terrible. So it's just going to start off with your clip and then it'll switch to Kent. And so
All
if
right.
you have anything if you want me to pause and so you're going to add a comment, just let me know. Okay.
All right. Cool. Sounds good.
Stated Clearly presents What is the evidence for evolution? The theory of biological evolution makes two very bold claims about living creatures. First, all living things on Earth are related.
That is definitely a bold claim. They show evidence that there are 1,000 different kinds of bats, and they probably had a common ancestor called a bat. Therefore, in their mind, bats are related to porcupines. No, there are 2 different kinds of beavers. Might have had a common ancestor, a beaver. 6 different kinds of cormorants. They might have had a common ancestor. We do this on our tour. I'd have a blast doing this. 64 different kinds of herons. Might have had a common ancestor called a heron. That's as far as it goes, guys. Your tree of life is baloney. It's not true. You're lying to the kids. Stop it, okay?
They evolved from a common ancestor. Second, the evolution of living things is powered by natural processes.
I want you to watch what he does here. He's got 4 different colored bugs. One of them is green, and so the lizard can't see the green one. So he survives. This is true, by the way.
Processes. Things which can be studied and understood.
I agree. We can study and understand that those with better camouflage may survive. That does not make it turn into something else, though, okay?
But that's natural selection right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not turning into something else, but you have descent with modification acted upon by natural selection. So every generation there's variation in a population. And so if anything gets even better at surviving, then it's going to, those traits will be passed on further. So yeah, he's just ignoring, and he knows this. I mean, here's the thing about Kent Hovind, the reason that I don't normally respond to him is because he's just being dishonest. He's just pretending that he doesn't know how this stuff works, but he's had enough people talking to him and showing him this stuff for a sufficient number of years that, he understands what he's doing. He knows which little pieces he's hiding from his audience to just vandalize the science. Yeah.
Yeah. He really conflates 2 different things. Like he'll say something like, okay, so these different animals had a common ancestor, these like birds, like finches, but that doesn't mean that a finch is related to an amoeba, or that doesn't, like he takes these 2 things that are separate, but that are both part of evolution, but that are not related to each other specifically. And I'll say, well, this thing doesn't prove this other thing. And it's like, well, nobody claims that it did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you just have to go back further in the fossil record. I mean, to find the relation between, reptiles and birds, you have to go back pretty far. You have to go back before dinosaurs. So yeah, it's just a timeline difference. So they're using a creation model where they think that super rapid evolution can happen, but only within certain limits. And in reality, we don't find what those limits don't exist. I mean, if you look at the fossil record, you just go back through the fossil record and you find reptiles and birds merging through the lineage of dinosaurs and going back further. You find mammals and reptiles merging in the fossil record. So it's just, he's using common sense arguments that make sense if you don't understand what the data is. If you've never been to a museum, which his target audience is kids that are kept away from this type of stuff. They're kept away from this type of information. So yeah, if you're kept away from museums, if you're kept away from textbooks that talk about this, then you can get away with making these arguments, because most people in their normal day-to-day life, they see a bird and they see a lizard and they look like totally different things. But if you just have more data, you realize, okay, these things do share a common ancestor, in fact. So, yeah.
Stop.
Things which can be studied and understood. But is there really any evidence that these two claims are true? Yes. There are so many observable facts from so many different fields of study.
And here's where they're going to overwhelm the kids with supposed evidence. Like, oh, look at all the evidence. Everyone can be debunked. And the guys from Stated Clearly, I'll debate all of you at the same time with half my brain tied behind my back. We can do it right here. Come visit Dinosaur Adventureland. We can do it on a neutral channel. I'll take your lying. There is no evidence that all living things are related. Stop lying to the kids.
So first of all, how dare you lie to all the kids, Stated Clearly. But apparently all of the people, all of you guys at Stated Clearly, all hundreds of you have been challenged. You've been called out by Kent. Because there's a lot of you.
Yes, all 100 of me has got the debate me bro challenge. Okay.
Have you ever done any debates like this about evolution, or you just do the educational content?
I've done quite a few debates with people who seem sincere about it, who are actually interested in trying to understand this stuff. So if you go to my Stated Casually channel, I've got a couple of those posted. The first one I did was with a guy named Steve Gregg, and that was 10 years ago. We did that big event. It was fun. We had like 400 people show up. He runs a radio show. And the reason I wanted to do a debate with him is because he was actually interested in trying to understand better, like, what the arguments are for this. And so it was a respectful type debate and discussion that we were having, and how it is that, how is it that different Christian groups are dealing with this? And like we'll see here in a little bit, Kent is, he just, well, aside from just doing these types of vandalism type things that he does, where he just hides obvious data that he's aware of from his audience, he also does, he does insults, or like, I think he tries to say that I'm gay later or something.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why is that? Why is this? I mean, that's actually not even an insult.
Right.
It's like,
right.
Are we 12 years old in the 90s or something? Like, what's going on here? So it's just, there's childish behavior there. It's not worth spending time with that guy. So,
yeah. So I wanted to read this comment from Deck Chair. It says, "Hi, John. You are such a great science communicator. Thanks for all you do."
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So,
and hello.
Yeah. Hello to all the people in the chat. Hopefully we can get some more people in here. So let's just continue.
And don't pile up the evidence. All of it can be debunked.
That the only way we can even begin to talk about them is to group them into categories or lines of evidence. To keep things simple, here we'll focus on evolution's first claim that all living things on Earth are related. We cannot tackle the entire tree of life at once. After all, there's an estimated 8.7 million species alive today.
And they all fit in a dot, smaller than a period on a page. That's the hard part to believe. That is so hard.
Yeah, so this is one thing that really annoys me that Kent says, because I mean, this is just him blatantly lying, and even he has to know he's lying here, because Kent shows on his channel that the Big Bang, the cosmologists say that the Big Bang happened and then the Earth formed billions of years later.
Mhm.
So how can you say that the animals were compressed into the singularity at the start of the Big Bang if the Earth didn't even exist at that point? That's like you said, vandalizing the science. I like that term.
Yeah. I also don't understand why he would be against the Big Bang, because that's like when the Big Bang first came out, that was a theory that Christians were using to argue for there was a beginning.
Mhm.
I do find it weird that there are some people that now are within the Christian world, they're now upset with the Big Bang Theory, but whatever. I mean, there are lots of things in science that are difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time and to study these things and understand them. And so it can sound totally crazy, like that the universe was once highly compressed. I don't do cosmology. It's not something that I've done videos on yet. And it's not something that I've studied very well, but it's like science can be counterintuitive. And so using these arguments where you try to say, oh, well, that sounds weird, therefore it's false. It's just kind of, it's a childish way to argue against scientific theory.
Right. He says that, that's not common sense. So that means that it's not true. But it's common sense if you go outside and you see the horizon and think from that observation that the earth is flat. But you need more data than just that to actually know the actual shape of the earth. So if you're just using a limited amount of data points and saying, well, this appeals to my common sense, so this must be true, that's not a good way to do science.
Right. Yeah.
So instead, we'll focus most of our attention on one fairly small but fascinating branch of the evolutionary tree, cetaceans. This branch includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Biologists tell us that all these creatures are closely related, and that the entire group evolved from an ancient four-legged land mammal.
They say biologists tell us, as if everybody agrees with this. Okay, it is not true. There are some who believe it. They need to be re-educated. They got lied to in their education. They're not related to a four-legged mammal. I'll show you in a minute.
Instead of taking their word for it, let's look at the facts. We'll start by looking at a few from the field of comparative anatomy, the study of differences and similarities between living things. Whales live in water, and from a distance, they sort of look like giant fish. A close inspection of their anatomy, however, tells us a very different story.
I think that's why the biblical authors thought that whales were fish.
Yeah.
And Kent has even defended that, he says the Bible has no contradictions, and people say, well, but the Bible says that a whale is a fish, or that Jonah was swallowed by a great fish. And he says, well, now it says that, but, maybe God doesn't care about the classifications that we use. And I don't know. It just seems like an arbitrary defense of something that he has to know sounds really bad. Like that just sounds wrong, because obviously the biblical authors didn't have the amount of knowledge and scientific advancements that we have now. And the classifications that we put different animals in, they're not just arbitrary. They're that way for a reason, Yeah.
I mean, well, I guess we could straw man his argument there and say that different cultures are going to classify things differently. So if the Bible was written for a specific culture at a specific time, then it would be using their classification system, right? But yeah, the discovery that whales are mammals was that was a new discovery that was surprising to a lot of people. I mean, like it was discovered long before Darwin. I mean, it was people who were whaling were the ones who figured this out. Like, what the heck? It has lungs and it's got milk and all this. Yeah, it was a fascinating discovery to make back then, because I mean they would have assumed that everything was a fish, and then like, wow, this is not. But maybe Jonah got swallowed by a whale shark, which actually is a fish.
True. Well, that's because the whalers, they were taking apart every part of the whale, right? Because they were the sperm whale hunters. So that's interesting. So that's actually how they discovered that they were mammals.
Yeah, I'm not sure who was the first to make that discovery, but I'm pretty sure if you go all the way back to Linnaeus, who was, he's considered the father of taxonomy, he was already classifying whales as mammals. I'm pretty sure. And that was like 1600s, I want to say. I'm really bad with dates, but I think that was it was long before Darwin. So it was well understood in Darwin's day that whales were mammals, and that baffled people. It was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you why would the assumption then was that everything was under special creation, and the question was like, why would you give something lungs and put it in the water so it could drown?
Right, right. Yeah, well, that does you sort of get into that question here. Why would God design an animal that lives underwater that doesn't have gills? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense
Yeah,
to me personally, but I guess we'll get into that.
yeah.
Whales, just like land mammals but unlike fish, have placentas and give live birth. They feed milk to their young. They are warm-blooded, which is extremely rare for a fish. And whales do not have gills. Instead, just like us, they breathe air with 2 fully developed lungs. Whales don't seem to have noses like mammals do. Instead, they breathe through blowholes coming out the tops of their heads. Some whales have 2 blowholes which almost look like nostrils. But dolphins and porpoises only have 1.
This is not true.
Surprisingly, if you look at their skulls, you find that the blowhole splits into 2 nasal passages inside the head.
So do they have 1 or 2 nasal passages? They have 2. Now it comes through the skin in one place, but coming through the skin, and don't get me started on this poor guy. Okay.
That's literally what I said.
I know, like I feel like he was trying to dunk on you there, but he's just like repeating what you said. And then he realized that he's like, yeah, don't even get me started on this guy. Like, stated queerly. Yeah, this is one thing I've observed doing a lot of these videos, especially when Kent is watching videos by R and Ra, is that I feel like he has to disagree, or he feels like he has to disagree with everything the person says. So sometimes he'll pause the video and he'll be like disagreeing, and he's talking faster than his brain is even working. So he just has to. He's basically being a contrarian.
Yeah.
So everything you said, even though he basically realizes that what you said makes sense and that he pretty much agrees with it, and then I just thought that was a funny moment of the video.
Could it be that the blowhole is actually a highly modified mammal nose?
Could it be the blowhole was designed so they could breathe when they come to the surface? You guys don't get it. You will not even consider, boy, that's an amazing design. They're going to swim along. They breathe through the top of their head. Well, they just had to touch the air, get a breath, and go back down. I think that's a pretty smart design. Submarines have snorkels that go up through the top instead of down through the bottom. Yeah. They can go underneath the water just a few feet, stay hidden, and have a little pipe going up. Why don't they put the pipe going down? There's no air down there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so one of my commenters said that this is not how submarines get air, that they take reserves of air down with them before they submerge, or whatever the word is. And like I was saying in my video yesterday, that there is air in the ocean because oxygen is just a gas, and a gas can be dissolved within a liquid. And if there's the fact that if there was no air underwater, then the fish would die. I mean, the fish are filtering the air out of the water using their gills because there is air in the water. That's why you see bubbles underwater. It's just like, this is the type of comment that, like, it's like when Matt Powell said that, like, there's no gravity in space or something like that. He said something like that. I forget what it was, but he's got a big list of really stupid comments.
Yeah. So he was talking about how this is a really great design. It is a wonderful adaptation. I mean, like that, and we can see this. We'll see it in a little bit here in the video. You see the transition of the nostrils to up higher and higher on the head. It's really neat to think about this evolving. When you got a normal, if you start out with a normal mammal nose, where the thing has to always keep putting its head up out of the water to breathe, the further up on the head that it goes, the more easy it is to grab a breath of air while still swimming. And then when you actually get to where it's on the actual top of your head that it's coming out, there's this really neat things that whales can do. they just barely break the surface and they can breathe while moving. And so they can be migrating, going really far and just barely skim the surface and breathe at the same time. So it's like, it's such a beautiful transition that's happened for them. And their ancestors were not able to do this. And you actually start seeing it like that. The further the blowhole gets towards the top of the head, the further we find these skeletons all around the world, probably because that helped enable long distance migrations throughout the ocean. That's really neat to see how this worked.
So it's accurate to say that like the ancestors of modern cetaceans like whales were ambulocetus or pakicetus that had their nasal passages on the front of their skull, and that those passages moved to the top of the head. And is it true that paleontologists have actually been able to measure like millimeters per million years that these openings move? I think I read that somewhere, something like that.
I don't know. That I'm not, when I do these videos, like if on this case, for example, I work with paleontologists so they can make sure that everything I'm saying in the videos are accurate.
That's good.
But I'm not sure if I don't have enough expertise to answer that detailed of a question. But
we have seen fossils of that movement of those nasal passages, right?
I mean, it's really hard to say, looking at fossils, how much change is happening over how many years. And the reason for that is that you can get a species to stay fairly similar for millions and millions of years, while another neighboring species changes quite a bit. And the reason for that is that it's mastered a specific lifestyle in a specific region of the ocean, a specific microenvironment. And so it's going to stay basically in the same morphology for a long time. And so you can actually get some things that freeze in their evolution, some things that are evolving really quickly, and that can happen side by side. So it can get tricky to try to measure these types of things, and get it, how many millimeters per year or whatever.
Yeah.
You can also get fairly small mutations that cause a large phenotypic effect that could happen in one generation. So it could move, like the blowhole could move 10 inches just from one parent to child, maybe. And that would be extreme, but you could have instances like that occur. We see things like that with domestic animals. You'll have pretty dramatic skull changes in a dog breed, for example, that happen really quickly. So it's difficult to tell exactly what was happening on a generation per generation or year by year basis in evolution just by looking at fossils. But I suppose you could get kind of a rough estimate of how that would work. If you were confident that all of the fossils that you had actually formed or seemed to form in a specific lineage.
Right.
But
it looks that way, but we'll need more evidence to be sure. Many whales have hair, just like land mammals. In this photograph, you can actually see the whiskers of this baby gray whale as he rests his chin on mama's back. Strangely, whales have arm, wrist, hand, and finger bones inside their front flippers.
Sir, they have what's called a flipper. There's not an arm, a hand, and finger bones. They have bones in there that maneuver the flipper around. How else would you design it? They want to have the flipper to be flexible, to be able to work hard, to grow, and maybe it's designed to be a flipper, but that's okay.
Here's a photo of...
I mean, that is a rock solid argument. I have to say, he's clearly been rebutted. I mean, I don't understand why you would have an organism that has a flipper, because to me it looks like an animal that used to have fingers that have been fused together, but the bones remained. It's also like, why do I forget what they're called. The sea pig, the sea cow, manatees.
Yeah.
Why do they have fingernails?
Yeah.
They don't like they don't have any use for those. Those would
Right.
definitely be a vestigial type of structure, I guess you could call it that.
hmm
But if I was going to design this differently, I would probably say, instead of having uh, individual finger bones, that I think you could get more power in a flipper if you had a plate of cartilage on the inside, maybe,
Yeah.
or bone possibly. But I think that if you're swimming through the water, you would have a lot more power than if you had separated bones, because there's no reason for that. Because the reason that finger bones, the reason you have those metatarsals, I think they're called, is because you want the dexterity of having individual fingers. But if you just have a big flipper, it doesn't make any sense, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So earlier he said that all of the facts can be debunked. And I think what you could do, if you take every fact that demonstrates evolution out of context of all the other facts, you could pretend that, oh, well, maybe it's just a coincidence, right? Maybe it's just a coincidence that it looks exactly like an arm with fingers.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a coincidence that it's not just fingers and a wrist. It's fingers, a wrist, and then the two bones, and then the one bone. I mean, it's a big coincidence. The coincidences are adding up here, but I guess you could get away saying that, well, sometimes things just happen. But then when you add that to everything else, from the fossils, from the embryos, like, again, you could take each thing and pretend that all the other evidence doesn't exist, just focus on that one thing and say, oh, maybe it's just a coincidence. But it's that these things add up. Like,
No, it's just
all
it's
of
a
these.
coincidence. It's a coincidence. It's
Yeah.
no, it's stop lying. Stop lying to the kids. Just stop it. How dare
Right.
you? How dare you?
Yeah.
Alvin.
These bones, the same bones that bats, hippos, and people
They're designed.
have in their front appendages.
Oh, they're not the same bones. They are similar design to all those other creatures because they serve a great function. They can have power to move in one direction, but they can also manipulate things around. And the arm is a great design for the system of bones works for the bat, works for all the mammals that I'm aware of, works great. Why won't you consider?
I mean, you could just apply this argument to any animal, though.
Right.
Why did so many animals go extinct then?
There's a really neat so there's arms and legs evolved from the pectoral fins and the pelvic fins of fish. But if you look at the pectoral fins and the pelvic fins in fish, they're very different. They don't have the same bone anatomy at all on the inside. They've got the little rays that come off of the, that form the flippers. There is a group of fish that have evolved arms and legs independently from tetrapods. So tetrapods are all the land animals that evolved. We evolved from a specific lineage of fish, and we evolved the specific bone structures that we have. Well, there's another group of fish that have evolved arms and legs independently. They live at the bottom of the ocean. They are, it's a type of, what is it? It's the kind that have the lure on their head. But they've evolved arms and legs separately, and the bone structure is completely different in there. But if you look at them walking around, they look like it's really funny because they look like little tetrapods. They call them sea toads.
The anglerfish.
Yeah. It's a group of anglerfish that have really, really well developed bones in their flippers. So, I mean, we have plenty of evidence that you don't need to build a flipper like that. I mean, we've got bony flippers in these fish, and they're built completely differently. So it's not like that's the only way to make a flipper is to make a hand first and then turn that into a flipper. That's not how all the other flippers are built. So.
Yeah. Do you know, in a shark fin, do they have cartilage in their fin, or?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's the only bone in a shark is in its mouth, right? Is that correct?
In most sharks, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd have to ask Kent, like, well, why, if it's such a great design, then why does the shark not have bone in its fin, in its flipper?
Yeah, and if you look at the structure that's in a shark or in any fish, that above the rays, so the rays are where that span that it kind of frays out to form the flipper. I I suppose you could get away with saying that, oh, maybe those are just the fingers, but they don't have joints in them, right? But then when you look past that, when you look at the part that actually attaches to the body, it's completely different than in humans, and it's completely different than in whales. Whales have the land mammal form of the one bone, two bones, then wrist, hand, and finger bones. So
Yep.
it's very obvious.
It's designed. I don't know what. Never mind.
One bone, two bones, wrist, hand, and finger bones. Modern whales do not have back legs, but they do have a strange pair of bones where the hind legs should be. Here's a picture of these bones from a bowhead whale. They almost look like shriveled hip, thigh, and shin bones. This one even has a ball and socket joint between the hip and thigh bone, just like the ball and socket joint in your own hip. Is this resemblance a mere coincidence, or are these real leg bones?
No, sir. We'll get into that in a minute. It was designed. So if somebody contacts the folks that stated clearly, tell them, I'll debate them over this topic or any topic on evolution. Every bit of evidence they offer, stated clearly, is not evidence for evolution. It's evidence for amazing design, including the whale hip bone we'll talk about in a minute.
That seems kind of like a false dichotomy to me, that it's either that it evolved or that like a God designed it. But there are people who are theistic evolutionists who think that God played a hand in evolution.
Yeah.
That would have no problem with that, or saying that maybe God didn't directly design it from, the top down, but rather he put into process these mechanisms so that the earth in its natural processes could bring forth different animals like this.
Yeah.
Sort of a hands-off approach.
Yep.
And I think it's just as valid as what Kent is saying here, because either way, I don't see one having more evidence than the other. But I mean, it just seems like anything that you say, he's just going to say, no, it's designed. It's designed.
Yeah.
It's not really a great argument.
Are these real leg bones?
No.
Perhaps leftovers from the whale's evolutionary
They're fake leg bones.
history.
Or perhaps they're using them today to make babies. We'll show you in a minute.
Before we draw any bold conclusions, let's see if a completely separate line of evidence will
Wait, before we go on any further, let's talk about this whale here. Let's see, where did I go? Part 4. Part 4 is open 3 different times here. Oh, there it is. Never mind. Right there. Okay. Alt-DV. Got to come over to this one. Go to the home. Whale, pelvis, slide number 1646. I'm going there. 1646. Enter. We've been through this before, but you guys don't seem to get it. This text, or this, what is this? American Heritage Dictionary. Whales, for example, have small bones located at the muscles of their body that are vestigial bones of hips and hind limbs. This propaganda is everywhere. You can check all the biology books there. Many organisms retain traces of their evolutionary history. The whale retains pelvic and leg bones as useless vestiges. Even Jeannie Scott, who I debated before and will debate any time.
See, I think that that's a misdefinition of the word vestigial, because this is a super outdated textbook, obviously. And vestigial doesn't mean that it's completely useless. It just means that it has a changed function from the function that same structure would have served in its evolutionary ancestor.
Yeah. I should have tried to look this up ahead of time. I was actually just trying to look it up just now, but Darwin had said, I'm pretty sure it's in The Origin of Species. It might have been in another one of his writings, but he was talking about vestigial organs specifically, and he defines it there. And he says that it's an organ that's lost one or more of its normal functions, functions that are found in the ancestor. So yeah, what he's going to be talking about there is he's going to be talking about hips. Like, our hips are used for many different things. Their main function is to support our legs, right? And attach our legs to our spine. But of course, also, our sex organs are attached to it, and our intestines run through the hole in the middle of it, and so on. So there's all those other functions. And whales lost that big weight-bearing function. in their hips, and we'll see it here a little bit. We'll see in the fossil record. We'll see that happening. They start by the hips detached from the spine, but there's still some fairly large legs on it, and then you get to really tiny legs, and then you get to no legs at all. And so now today, the only thing that the hips are really used for is there's ligaments that are attached to them that attach to the sex organs. And I believe in most species, there are ligaments that attach to the intestines as well. So it is like a little bony structure sitting in there that's still used for those things, but it's just the leftovers of these hips from the past.
Yeah, it is kind of odd if you look at just an image of a whale skeleton, how you have all of the bones that seem to be connected to each other, and then you see these small bones, the hip bones they appear to just be floating. They're not connected to anything in terms of bones, and they're shrunken in terms of the scale of the other bones in a whale. And to me, it just seems kind of obvious that they're not really a really important part of that skeleton, or else they would be, connected or bigger, but they're just sort of a site for muscles to attach to, or ligaments, which I think is pretty similar to the tailbone in humans.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't want to remove my tailbone, but
some people have had it removed. Yeah.
Jeannie, bring it on. You and Skip and the whole crew, come on down, okay? It's a non-profit organization. Yeah, they misspelled profit. They don't have any profits there. They need some profit skin there telling them what to do. Okay. They say, evidence for evolution from the Berkeley Science Education at Berkeley, California. Creation, evolution, bossy to blowhole. Really. Whales have a vestigial pelvis and leg bone that serve no purpose. Modern whales have hind limb bones, which have been reduced to only a few tiny internal hind limb bones that have no function. Well, just imagine whales walking around.
Yeah, if you watch my video, I don't say they have no function, because we do know that there's sex organs attached to it, but they're not used to walk anymore. There's no more legs attached to them. And the specimen that I show, in some individuals, you actually do have just not only you have the pelvis, you actually have the first leg bone, which is really cool, and it's got its own little ball and socket joint. But that's only in certain specimens. It's not even in every individual of a specific species. It's just in certain specimens that you'll get the actual leg bone to form as well. So it's an atrophied hip. There's no question about it.
Yeah. So, and this thing he's showing, this is not a textbook. This is like a children's picture book on whales. And I also dislike this quote because we're not talking about whales walking around. We're talking about the ancestors of whales.
Yeah.
So those are not whales. You think of whales, you think of an animal that's lives underwater and obviously doesn't have legs to walk around, but that's not what we're talking about here. So this is just obviously misrepresentation again.
Yeah.
Around. This is the propaganda kids face all the time, and you folks have stated clearly, say, look, this is evidence for evolution. No, it's not.
Yeah, there it is. You got to get that in somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's like we're dealing with a kid from the 90s, like that's, watched a bunch of Adam Sandler movies and is trying to make fun of people now. It's just,
Yeah, he did that to me during our debate. Like his first slide was talking about Atheist Junior is a bisexual. Like, what does that have to do with our debate?
Yeah. That's
Those little bones in there are part of the whale's reproductive system.
Oh, we have another super chat from Regios for $5. It says, textbook, children's book, they're on the same level to Kent. Yeah, that's pretty true. He doesn't really know the distinction between the two.
Okay. LA Museum of Natural History shows them. Look at that. There's the proof. Wisconsin. That was in Cambridge when I was over there. Here we go. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Proof for evolution. Humpback whale has bones back there. Yep, they sure do. So does the pilot whale. National Pornographic said millions of years ago, dolphins had legs. Here's the proof. The whale's pelvis is located far from the vertebra, has no apparent function. Damien, we got these in our science center. Do we have just that one, or do we have all three that we had?
I know we got one. I'll have to look and see.
Okay. If anybody works in Alaska where they butcher the whales, I'd like the whole system of the whale's reproductive system where they use these bones. We have the one, we'd like to get a bunch more. So if you go hunting or fishing for whales or...
Wouldn't that include the whale's penis? Like if you want the entire reproductive system?
Yeah. I mean, hey, they have dried whale penises, and I think it's like Iceland or Greenland. There's a museum of whale penises. And I actually here in Canada, I'm in Montreal now. There's a museum here that's got like a cross section of one that yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, you could have that. You could have that in your museum.
But he just wants somebody to just do all that work to like butcher a whale and like get all of those bones ready and then ship it across the country. Just do it, you know, just because I'm Kent Hovind and I asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or for dolphins, save us those bones, please. Those bones are anchor points for special muscles that allow the whales to reproduce. The male whale's penis is 15 feet long. He needs a little help to maneuver that thing underwater in the dark so he can make babies, and he can't talk and say, scoot over, honey. But this is used as evidence for evolution. Look at this. The whale has a vestigial pelvis. What bones were found? The species is known as from 3 individuals, all of which were found in one place in Pakistan. One male skeleton fully intact with minor erosion of the snout and tips of the backbone ridges. Male and female anatomy whales is very different, okay, like it is with every other kind of animal I'm aware of. They are different, and they need those special bones and muscles to reproduce underwater. Erotic endurance of whale hips. They're not whale hips, guys. You can read up on Carl Zimmer. Take you on too, Carl, anytime, about the so-called evidence for evolution. We cover this on our video number 4, Lies in the Textbooks. You get our whole series for $50, 18 hours. Call 855-BIG-DINO.
You can't beat that deal. I mean, do you have a DVD set for Stated Clearly?
I don't.
Wow, you're falling behind, you know.
Yeah.
Of course, your videos are on YouTube.
Yep.
And so are Kent's. So are the videos that are available in that set. So I have no idea why anybody would pay for a DVD set or who still owns a DVD player.
Well,
But
a lot of people in his audience don't allow their kids to use the internet. So I guess they're going to have to use DVDs, because if you let your kids use the internet, they'll get access to information, and you don't want that to happen. So
right. And I think another reason could be that he wants his materials in public schools. And you know, public schools, they always have the little trolley that has the TV on it and then like the DVD player under it.
Yep.
You ever? Yeah, like when you're in elementary school and they wheel that thing in. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's easier because, you know, a lot of teachers still don't know how to work YouTube. It's easier to just have that type of media so they can play it, because that's what he wants. You know, he wants this stuff in public schools, you know, but $50, man, that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, come on. I mean, at least give me Blu-ray, you know?
Right.
Go to extension 3, 2, I'm 3. I don't know what to do with extension 1 or 2. They'll do it. So let's go back and let this guy do his propaganda about the evidence for evolution from the whale. He's going to cover more on that right here.
Perhaps leftovers from the whale's evolutionary history. Before we draw any bold conclusions, let's see if a completely separate line of evidence will confirm our suspicions. Embryology is the study of how creatures develop before being born or hatching from an egg. Here we see a dolphin and a human embryo side by side at similar stages of development. Notice that they both have what look like arm buds and leg buds. In humans, the leg buds grow to become legs. In whales, they grow for a while but then stop, effectively fading away as the rest of the whale continues to grow. These are all photographs of a common dolphin at different stages of growth. Notice that early on, we see 2 nostril grooves on the front of the face, just like you'd expect in a puppy or a human. As the dolphin continues to grow, the nostrils migrate to the top of the head and fuse together, becoming the dolphin's blowhole.
So this is fascinating to me. So the way that this mirrors the migration of the nasal passages from the ancestors of cetaceans from the front to the top of their head. This would be like Evo Devo, right? Like that's the field that's studying that.
Yep.
And are you familiar with that field? Like, do you know what they study, or like, what is it? Is it just the relationship between those two things?
Yeah. They're studying. They just study all the different ways in which, you start from one starting point and you end in the very diverse ending points that we all have as adult organisms. There's a lot of really interesting things that can happen. So if you look at old writings, and these are writings that are attacked by creationists all the time. I think it was Ernst Haeckel, I think.
Yeah, Haeckel.
Yeah. He talked about, he said that the embryo basically just reruns everything that evolution did. And so he thought that evolution was just building on top of what happened before. And quickly, embryologists were like, no, that anything in the development can change at any point and cause a big deviation in the mature animal. So in Devo and evolutionary development, they study all the different changes that happen in the embryo to make the adult form of an organism. And they will trace things. They'll do things like what I just showed there, where they just look at embryos at different stages, and you can just watch the different parts migrate in different ways in different species. Or they can actually trace things molecularly, like to see which genes are being activated at what time and what the consequences of that are. It's a really cool field of research.
Yeah. So Haeckel said that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny.
Yeah.
And yeah, he is attacked all the time by creationists, especially Kent, because he says that Haeckel made up his drawings and lied about them. All Haeckel really did was, when he was making his first book that contained the scientific drawings of the embryos he had done, he was rushing to put it out. And so instead of making sure that all of the drawings came from looking at under the microscope and then, sort of copying that, he did some of the drawings from memory.
Yeah.
And then that was just the first edition of his book. And then in the later editions, he corrected that. But, just that mistake has, followed him for decades after his death, a long time. And creationists still, they still go after Haeckel all the time.
Yeah. And the funny thing about that is that, okay, well, we don't use those old drawings anymore. I literally show, only thing I show in my video are photos of actual embryos, and I still get people talking about him in the comment section, creationists. It's like, you guys aren't even engaging in the actual content I showed you. I didn't show you drawings that he made. I showed you actual photographs of actual embryos. It's amazing the how you can literally show people something and they will just parrot an argument that they heard on the internet somewhere else that has nothing to do with what you just showed them. Yeah. And I mean, that's what Ken Hovind does here too. But.
So far, we have multiple facts from two independent lines of study, comparative anatomy and embryology, that are both telling us the same story.
Yes, they're both telling the same story, that things are amazingly designed. Start off with a sperm and an egg and slowly grow and make a whole dolphin. And you think that happened by chance over billions of years. I think maybe the whole system was designed.
The ancestors of whales were once four-legged land creatures.
It does not teach you any such thing. That is your propaganda, sir. Stop lying to the kids. They were designed. Dolphins have always been observed to produce baby dolphins, nothing else. Humans make humans, whales make whales. There are no exceptions, none. Stop dreaming and putting them all on a tree and drawing lines between them.
Yeah, but nobody is arguing that that's what evolution says, though. Like, nobody is saying that a cat will like give birth to a dog or something like that.
No. So he's talking about, he says that just by chance. The process of evolution is only a partially chance thing. You have descent with modification, and those modifications from generation to generation, those are more or less, you can consider those chance events. I mean, obviously there are actual causes, just that they're, really complex causes. It's like saying, if you roll a dice, there's a cause, there's a reason that you got the ending number that you got, but those numbers aren't trackable. those reasons are not trackable. And the same thing happens in biology. You have descent with modification. So all these different variations. I don't know. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I assume you're slightly different than them, right?
Yeah. We are not exact clones of each other.
Right. I have an identical twin brother, and we're actually, people can tell us apart just fine. But you have descent with modification, and then you have natural selection, which acts upon that. And selection is not a random thing. I mean, the reason that some things reproduce and have more offspring is because they happen to be better for some reason, one reason or another, at surviving and reproducing. And so you just get that accumulation over many, many generations, and you get all sorts of evolutionary innovation to happen. So that's not chance. That's this thing worked, that thing didn't. The origin of new traits you can think of as chance, but that's the only part of evolution where chance does come into play. So
yeah, like DNA is trying to replicate itself, and it's never going to, or it's usually not going to do it perfectly.
right.
It's going to have some replication errors, which we call mutations, and then some of those are going to be neutral. Some of them might be harmful, but it happens, and creationists like Kent will deny this, but some of them are going to be beneficial,
Right.
and those will be selected for. So that part's random, but traits that are selected for, like an animal with thicker fur surviving over animals that have thinner fur in a cold environment, that's not chance to me. That's logical, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just a straw man again. There's so many different straw mans that he does. To just say that, oh, it all happened by chance. I feel like he said, when he's saying chance, that means if you think that it wasn't a god that did it, then that you think it all just happened by chance, I guess.
Right.
And which is again part of his false dichotomy, that it's either my God designed it, or it's just atheistic evolutionary chance. Hitler, abortion.
Yeah, and again, people have explained this stuff to him before. It's not like he's confused. Like he understands that evolution is a process. It's not nothing poofed into existence. There's a long, slow process, and that the craziness of each single event is not big. It's very probable. That something, it's highly probable that something is going to be born. If I have a kid, it's highly probable that one of my kids is going to be more efficient at survival and reproduction than I am. It's just most likely. But
yep. Okay, we have a super chat for $4.99 from Vandalia 1998. It says, has Kent brought up the Big Bang or geology in his rant against evolution yet? The Big
he
Bang,
did bring
yes.
up Big Bang.
Yeah. Geology, I don't think so. Well, I know he talks about fossils and how there's no fossil record. And he talks in this video, he talks about how they date the geologic layers by the fossils and the fossils by the layers. So he will bring that up if he hasn't already. So the answer is basically yes.
The ancestors of whales were once four-legged land creatures. Will the fossil record act as a third witness, confirming this idea?
There is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, but it's not a record. It's a bunch of bones in the dirt. And when you find fossils, what you know is it died. You don't know that the fossil had any children at all. You certainly don't know it had different children. And why do they think a bone in the dirt can do something no animal today can do, produce something other than its kind? The fossils of the clams, I bet when they had babies, they were clams. Couldn't prove that, but I can show all the clams today have baby clams. That's it. All the evidence points to clams make clams, and clams only come from clams. But you wanted me to think clams come from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. And you want me to think a dolphin and a whale and a monkey are related.
It's worth talking about here. It's just mentioning that it's true. Everything gives birth to what is close enough to its own kind at the time. It's things separate. It takes a long time for things to separate and become things that are just obviously different. And what we're looking at now, when we look at different animals, is we're looking at the ends of these branches that split millions and millions of years ago. And so we see these dramatic differences between a frog and a hawk. But that's the only reason for that, is that they separated a long time ago. But each generation, parent to child, they're obviously the same thing.
Yeah, and he intentionally picks animals that are extremely far apart on purpose in
Yeah.
order to make evolution look like it's illogical and ridiculous and hard to believe.
Yeah. One way to talk about it too would be like if you had a picture of a rainbow and you zoomed into to see all the pixels, you would see that each pixel looks like the same color as the next pixel. But then if you go 1,000 pixels over to the right, you'd see, wow, that one's a totally different color than the pixel I started looking at. But at each different spot in that transition, you're going to see, if you're looking at a real rainbow, not a cartoon drawing of a rainbow, you're going to see it just the next pixel looks just like the one you were looking at before. So it's that's how transitions work.
Yeah, and one question I've heard posed to people like Kent is that if you had like a bucket of water that was dyed blue with blue food coloring, and you started adding drops of red food coloring, you could ask them, okay, at what point does it switch from being blue to being purple? Well, like there's not an exact point. There's not an exact, like if you counted the number of drops, you couldn't say that at this exact drop is when it switched from being blue to purple, because it's too gradual.
Yeah.
And evolution is too gradual for, what he's asking for one animal like changing or transforming into another. Like you're just not going to see it happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he really seems to think that evolution, like I swear he thinks when he shows these family trees, that like the amoeba, it's not an amoeba, but he calls it an amoeba, actually transforms into like a horse and a scorpion and a tree and like a cow and then also a human. Like that it's just one single-celled organism that actually changes into all these different things. Like he has this really deep misunderstanding of what these are supposed to be conveying, unless he's just playing dumb. I really can't tell sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, so the common ancestor of animals was a thing that's, well, it's sort of amoeboid like. It's there are these organisms that are they're filter feeders. They can attach to things, and they actually can, if you smash one, it can actually turn into an amoeba like form and crawl out of the crack that it's in. These organisms still exist today, and they're fairly similar to what we think the common ancestor of all of us was. All animals were, but we didn't all evolve independently from that thing. We share a common ancestor with these things, and we all evolved from that common ancestor. So,
Extinct basilosaurid whales. These animals are known for multiple well-preserved skeletons, and they appear to have lived side by side roughly 34 to 40 million years ago.
How do you know that a date? Anybody know how they tell the date when the fossils lived? By which layer they come from. And how do they date those layers? By the fossils they find in them. Circular reasoning.
That's not true.
No. So we have very specific layers in the Earth that have been named before we were able to date them. So people have there's the Cambrian and that all these layers have names based on where they were found in the world. And when we see a layer in England, we can find that same layer in France, based on the types of fossils that are in it and the chemical composition. So we can say, oh look, we're looking at the same layer that we found in England a while back. And to get the actual dates for that, we use radiometric dating usually it's on volcanic crystals. So when a volcano explodes, when that lava forms crystals, it starts to cool down, it forms crystals. You can actually measure those crystals and you can get a date for those. And so we've got these layers, we've got them all named. We can see those same layers in different parts of the world. We can get dates whenever there was a volcano that happened in one of those layers, anywhere in the world, basically. We can use that to get our dates for that layer, and then we know the date of that layer. So we use we do use fossils, certain fossils and certain chemical signatures. There's a whole bunch of different things that you check to make sure that you're in the layer you think you're in. And some of those things are fossils, but that's how you tell which specific layer you're in. But to get the date, you do radiometric dating.
Right.
So he's using something that's partly true and pretending that that's the whole story. It's like, wow, this is extremely naive.
Yeah.
He's exploiting the ignorance of his audience. It's very just incredibly dishonest.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we have another super chat for $5 from Vandalia in 1998. It says, "Are we sure Kent is real and not a cut and paste video program? Because I've heard all these catchphrases in every Kent video ever."
Yeah.
The world may never know. I mean, that sounds like an episode of the X-Files. Maybe we can get Dog the Bounty Hunter to investigate this. I don't know. But I think Kent, this is one thing. Kent doesn't seem to mind repeating all these things. Like, it would drive me crazy either having to do that or being one of those people at Dinosaur Adventureland and having to listen to this stuff. I mean, it's bad enough hearing it on video, but like he repeats himself endlessly.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, Big Bad Mama. Thank you for joining us.
We cover that on video number 4, Lies in the Textbooks. There is no such thing as a geologic column. No such thing. Doesn't exist anywhere. There is no fossil record.
In this photograph, we're looking down at the top of a basilosaurid skull. This is not a model or a cast. These are the actual bones which were pulled from the ground. Notice that the nasal opening is not on the top of the head like those of modern whales, and not at the end of the snout like those of land mammals. Instead, it's right in the middle. This is an intermediate species, exactly what evolution tells us we should find.
So by lining them up in the way you'd like it to happen, this is somehow evidence now. I could line up a bicycle, a tricycle, and a four-wheeler. 2-wheel, 3-wheel, 4-wheeler. What does that prove? Nothing.
At the back end of a basilosaurid's body, there are small, yet fully developed hips, legs, ankle, feet, and toe bones. These legs are far too small for walking on land, but they may have been useful while mating or for scratching away parasites and itchy skin. Evolutionary theory tells us that the further we go back in time, the harder it should be to distinguish whales from normal land mammals.
You can't go back in time. Going down in the dirt, digging up bones is not going back in time. I've dug up many fossils, and I look at my watch, whatever the date is, that's the date I dug up the fossil.
But the fossil didn't form on that day, did it?
Yeah. I mean, this is just like it's so juvenile. It's why I never bothered responding to this kind of stuff, because it's like, really?
What do you even say to that?
Do we have to like? Yeah.
Yeah. This is what I was saying. Like, Kent, do you know what a metaphor is? Like, I mean, are you playing dumb, or are you just? This is why I say he's a contrarian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like he's just going to dig his heels into the sand and say, no, I'm not going to engage with the argument and with any type of intellectual honesty at all. I'm just going to say, nuh-uh. Like, I got a comment yesterday that says that Kent Hovind's main argument is nuh-uh.
Yep.
Which is like, that's pretty much true.
Yep.
None of the fossils had a date on them.
Meet Myocetus. The hip bones of Myocetus seem sturdy enough to walk on land, but this animal is considered to be a whale for many reasons. Their skeletons have all been found among fossils of sea creatures, which tells us they lived in the ocean.
Well, the skeletons have all been found among sea creatures. So have nearly all fossils. I mean, there was a flood that killed everything. All kinds of stuff got jumbled together.
That's just not true.
No.
The fossil record is not all jumbled together. You're not going to find a mammal skeleton in the Precambrian layers. you're not going to find a Australopithecine skeleton in the same layer as a modern Homo sapien skeleton.
Yeah.
There's not this jumbling that he said. And most of the fossils that we know of are fish or animal fossils, or sea life, but that's just because most of the animals that fossilize are going to fossilize underwater, and there are so many more animals that lived underwater, and that like shells, like crustaceans. Those animals are a lot easier to fossilize than when you live on land and you have animals like vultures and scavengers that pick bones apart and carry them around. So it's a lot easier for those type of animals to fossilize when they die and sink to the bottom of the seafloor and get buried really quickly.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there is a flood or a global flood.
Yeah.
Clams are found on top of Mount Everest. What does that prove? There was a flood.
Their short legs, combined with long, flat fingers and toes, suggest they were strong swimmers with webbed hands and feet.
Let's go back to the Myocetus here. Lies in the textbooks right here. How do I get over to this one? Okay. Myocetus. I think I got, there you go. There is the Myocetus. 3 of them were found, all in Pakistan. It's the size of a human, 6 foot long. But they put this in sequence, of course, exaggerating the size of the drawing to say this is evidence for evolution. And it came to a whale, a 90-foot whale. Oh, okay.
So this is from your website, stated clearly. Did you exaggerate the size of the drawing?
That's all. That's not my website, actually. But
oh, the screenshot says it is. Are you lying to me like you lie to the children? I don't know.
Pretty sure that's not on my website.
Okay.
I didn't build that. Anyway, the scale's not messed up. The picture he's showing us there, the scale's not messed up. Like that, the animal he's showing is 6 feet long, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what he's talking about. But yeah, most whales are small. This is a general, most people don't think about this, but yeah, most whales are small. Most porpoises and dolphins are pretty small. You've got extremely large animals that are whales, but most of them are small. And one of the really neat things that happens here with the origin of, with the evolution of whales is that once they became fully aquatic, they stopped going on land at all. Well, now there's no real size limitation because they're in the water, so they're floating. So
Right.
You don't have to worry about organs or bones being smashed by gravity. And so you've got these whales that have evolved, to be, filter feeders, and they got huge, largest animals on Earth. The other nice thing about them is, lungs, for as nasty as they are, if you live in the water, the cool thing about lungs is that we can pull a lot more oxygen out of the air with lungs than a fish can pull out of the water with gills. And that actually really helps with increasing body size. So the largest fish in the world is the whale shark. And, it's a type of shark that they're actually, they have to be swimming constantly with their mouths open, and their gills are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is they have to pull in tons of water to extract enough oxygen to maintain their giant bodies. And whales don't have to deal with that issue as much because they can actually just breathe the air. So that's one reason why they got so big. The other reason is that they're not dealing with gravity. So basically, if there's any sort of selection pressure that promotes large body size, they can evolve large body size. They're not restricted like the rest of us are. So
those filter feeding whales, do they use baleen to filter out the plankton?
yes, yep.
Yeah, we have SeaWorld where I live, and I remember going on one of like the behind the scenes tours or whatever that you can go on.
Yeah.
Where like you get to, or when I did it, you get to go on the stage and play with the sea lions. They have one with beluga whales, the little white cetaceans, I guess they are. And then the one I did was sea lions. And also they show you these big pieces of baleen that are huge. And Do the whale sharks have that as well?
No, I'm not sure what they're doing. I'm actually not sure what the inside of a whale shark's mouth looks like. But yeah, they do not have baleen. That baleen is unique to filter feeding whales, and it's actually modified hair. So it's like a keratin hair-like structure inside their mouth. They're I think it's in South Carolina that they found a whale that had both teeth and baleen. So the transition of this, it was a toothed whale with baleen, and these baleen whales actually, if you cut open their jaw, you can see that there's teeth inside their jaw that just never come out. They only use their baleen, and modern whales do. Modern filter feeding whales do, and it's a totally unique structure. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the animal kingdom. It's modified hair, keratin. So it's kind of like a really stiff mustache inside their mouth,
or a big fingernail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I feel like I'm learning so much.
Cool.
Let's see, right. I'm starting to get this figured out. Here, okay.
Here we see the bottom side of a Myascetus jaw and skull. Her teeth match those of the basilosaurid whales we saw earlier, and the unique structures of her middle ear bones match those of basilosaurid whales and modern whales. Myascetus appears to be a walking whale. Scientists have found the fossils of many ancient whale-like mammals and continue to find more. Together, these fossils blur the line between four-legged land mammals and fully aquatic modern whales, solidifying the idea that whales indeed evolved from land creatures.
Or solidifying the idea that maybe all these creatures were designed to do what they do. Nobody ever sees any animal today produce offspring other than the same kind. Every farmer in the world counts on it not happening. But they somehow, in their mind, have imagined, SpongeBob style, where'd you go? Here we go. Just imagine, this is proof they changed.
Like, where is he keeping that SpongeBob? Like, he had that ready to go. I mean, this is not true to say that farmers would say that evolution is wrong. Farmers use evolution all the time. I mean, they would be bankrupt without it. You know, it's how they get new crops of corn, all types of vegetables. It's how they get their cattle to be bigger and bigger, or get dairy cows to produce more milk. Like, I would love for a farmer to come on and just explain to Kent how he's wrong, and stop using us to misrepresent evolution, please.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some farmers that don't like the theory of evolution, but yeah, it's very important for understanding if you're trying to breed new crops or breed specific types of crops that you want to work better in your local ecosystem. Yeah, you would need you'd either need to hire someone else to do it, or you'd have to understand how descent with modification works. So, yeah.
Why can an animal today only produce babies the same as itself, but all the ones in the bones in the dirt were somehow able to do different? You guys need some serious help.
Kent has kids, right?
Evolution.
Yep, he sure does.
He should know they're not exactly like him.
Thank God.
Now let's look at a fourth line of evidence, DNA. DNA molecules contain chemical codes which act like recipes for living things. Without ever looking at bones, embryos, or anatomy, researchers can compare the DNA code of different living creatures to find out who is most closely related to who.
Is that all they're looking for? Evidence for who's related to who? Why don't they look at that incredible DNA code and say, wow, this is pretty smart code writer. Anybody here ever written computer code? Steve, you've written some computer code.
I mean, you can't really just gloss over the fact that DNA proves common ancestry. I mean, come on. Yeah. Like, you can't just gloss over that fact and change the subject to something that completely proved your entire argument wrong there.
Yeah, it's something that I see a lot. People will say, yeah, but what about this? And, you know, they're retreating. That's a move of retreat. They don't want to engage with that specific argument, so they want to talk about something else. I've got a whole series of videos on the genetic code, the origin of the genetic code, and what it is, how it works. He's welcome to go watch. I've got a 2-hour lesson on that, actually. He's welcome to go learn about that elsewhere. But this is just someone who's losing, that's retreating in their argument. He's trying to change the subject. He doesn't want to talk about the common ancestry, so he's ignored everything so far, and so that's his tactic here.
Yeah, definitely.
Damien, do you do that kind of stuff? Okay. The fact that there are similar lines of code in different programs, does that prove nobody wrote the code, or does that prove that you need that line of code to work, like go to spell check, or something like that? Their lines of code are evidence of intelligent input designer. How can you guys not see it?
Whale DNA has been compared to all kinds of other animals. Fish, sea lions, you name it. And so far, the closest genetic match is to the pudgy, water-loving hippopotamus. This does not mean that whales evolved from hippos, but if this genetic finding is correct, whales and hippos both evolved from a common ancestor that lived roughly 54 million years ago.
Don't get it, guys. The reason they're similar, they have the same designer. Microsoft Power.
Then why are there animals that are different?
Yeah.
That argument doesn't really work when you look at animals like the platypus that are very different from most any other animal.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing he's ignoring here is that you've got lineage specific traits. It's like we can see this you can see something similar to this in cars, like this car uses this specific type of engine and this specific type of seatbelt or whatever, and you can see that the newer one does the same. That's because there's like patents on things, and certain companies have the patents. Did God patent one lineage against him using those same features in a different lineage? Was there patent issues that God had that caused him to create? Because this is a mammal, we have to put hand bones in it instead of fish flippers, because we just have to. These things are, all of these facts are just ignored when they say, "Oh, common design, common designer." That's not all that we're seeing here. We're seeing very specific lineages that are nested inside of. These traits are nested in a hierarchical lineage-based nesting.
And they contradict themselves when they say that it was designed, so it was designed from the very beginning, and yet they'll say that on Noah's Ark there was a generic type of dog, and then after that we've had all the diversification of dogs to get all the breeds we have now. But that means that all these breeds weren't designed by God. They were created by this process, which they don't want to call evolution. They just want to call it like variation within the kind. But that's still not designed by God, though. That's an incidental design by nature, really.
Yeah.
But it's like they just tackle one thing at a time. And then they just hope that you don't compare the different things they say and group them together, because they definitely don't form an actually logical worldview if you put it all together, but individually they can make sense to people at the time. So that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Lines of code. Did you ever find that out, Steve? You were going to check how many lines of code does PowerPoint have? Yeah, find out how many lines of code Microsoft PowerPoint has. And I would be willing to bet Microsoft Word has a whole bunch of the identical lines of code. Does that prove nobody's writing this code? Or does that prove maybe that's a system that works? You guys don't get it. The similarities of all these animals is evidence that God designed them. How many words on a PowerPoint slide? 6 lines or less per slide. I didn't know that. How many lines of code in PowerPoint? Let's see.
What?
How many millions of lines of code? Wow. Right there. 12 million lines of code for PowerPoint. Do you think
evolution is refuted I guess you're gonna have to you're gonna have to delete your channel, John.
Yeah, I don't even know this. Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, the PowerPoint. You heard the man. I mean,
Yep.
uh,
Brilliant.
well, we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was
happened by
great.
chance.
Are there any
At
other
first,
arguments
the
or
link between-
questions that people have? Are there any other arguments he makes that you think we should listen to, or questions that people have that we should address?
For Kent, I don't really think so. I think we could play the video a little bit longer. Then if you guys in the chat, if you have any questions that you want to ask John, I will certainly put them up on the screen, and we'll probably go for another like 15 minutes or so. How does that sound?
Yep, that's
All
good.
right, cool.
Whales and hippos surprised researchers because whales are mainly carnivores. They eat things like fish and small crustaceans. Hippos, on the other hand, are mostly vegetarian. A closer look, however, reveals that hippos and whales actually share many strange features, some of which may have come from their common ancestor. Ancient walking whales have specially shaped ankle bones.
You know, one thing I did want to ask you, can you talk about those skulls that are behind you? Because I was really curious about those.
I've got a gorilla, a chimp, and a human. These are all they're bone clones, so they're replicas. I don't have an actual human head in my office, but yeah, it's just two of our three closest relatives. Actually, I guess four closest relatives, because there's chimps and bonobos are really similar, but they're two different species. Gorillas, there's actually, I think there are three species of gorilla, just one species of human. And then orangutans are the other closest thing to us. But yeah, I just have these. It's neat to see what our kin look like and how they compare to us.
Yeah, and it definitely makes a good background for doing YouTube. Like, I know Gutsick Gibbon has some of those. I think she has like a saber-toothed tiger, one of those replica skulls. And is that a picture of Charles Darwin also?
Yeah, I drew that. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are you an artist? Are you
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I started out doing science illustration. So I have, training in classical art and now digital art. Most of my digital art I learned on my own, but yeah, that's what a lot of my training's in.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I just I like doing painting. Like, that's what I like to do in my free time. I posted on Twitter and on my community tab a picture of some acrylic paintings I did recently. So that's really cool. I didn't even realize that was just a drawing. I thought it was just like a photo. So
Yeah.
I think do you think John could do a video on radiometric dating? I think you already have. Is that true or no?
Actually, I have not. No, that's been on my list because I was actually working when I still lived in Oregon. I was working. We had coffee once with a guy who does that for a living, and we were talking about doing a video. And then I ended up moving, and I haven't. It's just been on the to-do list for a long time. But yeah, I should bump that up. Trying to think if I have. I might send you links to some books that are good for that. Having trouble remembering off the top of my head because I don't have it here with me, but there are a couple of textbooks that are really good that talk about that, and then a couple of popular science books as well. I have done a video on Stated Casually about that, where I talk about radiometric dating in dinosaur bones, but it's not as in depth as I would want something to be, because I want to be able to show people exactly how the process works and the different types that we use, because there's a bunch of different kinds. A lot of people hear about carbon dating all the time. Carbon dating is just one of many that we use, and carbon dating is only for looking at things that are several thousands of years old. It's only accurate for a few thousand years. There's a bunch of them, and it's something that I would need to sit down with a researcher to like come up with a way to teach this stuff in a way that's going to be really solid. But
so on the Stated Casually channel, how did you how did you land that interview with Richard Dawkins? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, I've been working with people from his charity for quite a while. Just I've been doing favors for them every once in a while when they're doing lessons and stuff. They need graphics for things. So I knew people that knew him, and then I also worked with Stuart West at Oxford on a couple of videos, and they're close. So it was just I had enough connections that people had showed his work. He was actually emailing back and forth about some of my videos. He was reviewing some of them at one point, and then I asked him if he'd do a video, an interview. He's like, "I try not to do them very much on YouTube, but okay." So yeah, it was awesome. I mean, I met him once in person years ago, but is that one of those things where you're just going to someone's talk and then you meet someone for 5 minutes afterwards? And then we'd email back and forth for a while because he was reviewing videos. It was really fun to talk to him. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you so much, John, for coming on and doing this. I know we had some hiccups, scheduling things, but I'm glad that we were able to finally knock it out, and I really appreciate it. It was fun. I do apologize for forcing you to watch Kent Hovind's content, but it was fun. So I'm glad that you could come on. So thank you.
Yeah. It was great being here.
Yeah. So I'll put the link to your channel and that original video in both channels.
Cool.
And yeah, I appreciate you tweeting out the link to this stuff. And, I will just say to all my viewers, thank you guys for watching. We had about 80 or 90 people in the live chat watching.
Cool.
And yeah, to all the people who watched the replay of this, leave a comment telling me what you think. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah.
See you later.